Mr. Chairman, you are live.
Let's go and call the roll.
Senator Bouchard.
Here.
Senator French.
Here.
Senator Cost.
Excused.
Senator Wasserberger.
I'm excused.
Chairman Boner.
Here.
3 present, 2 excused.
Okay, well, we'll go ahead and get started here at almost 6 o'clock in the evening. First bill we have is House Bill 51. So this is extension or the legislative, I guess, the legislature weighing in on a program dealing with expanding meat processing capacity, something that the executive branch has done, has worked on immediately, but it's something obviously we're interested in as well. This fits within an overall strategy of more of the short-term concerns of expending federal CARES Act funds. So that being said, this is a program through the Department of Agriculture. So if they're online, it'd be great if they could provide some testimony.
Mr. Chairman, Director Mayamato is online and I'm bringing him in.
Okay, great.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Am I coming through okay?
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Mr. Chairman, I think with regard to our testimony on this bill, it's one of those that we performed in the immediate response to the pandemic over the last year. We're fairly familiar, and I think we have what we need from the House debate side of the equation. And what you see reflected here, we had a cost share program. It was a 50-50 cost share program. It seemed to go reasonably well. We know we can implement it. The amount that we used, enter to the department and in performing this program was negligible. So we're fairly confident that we can carry out the provisions of this act without any struggle here at the department. And if you have any questions for me, happy to answer those.
Any questions for the Department of Agriculture? Okay, very good. Thanks, Director. It looks like we do have an engrossed version. Do you have a summary of what the House did to this? It's my understanding that there was some substantial amendments, which was appropriate considering this was originally intended as a special session bill, but is now obviously being considered as we look at what remains of the Federal CARES Act, maybe even looking forward with ARP. So if you have that handy, Director, that'd be useful, I think, for the committee.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I do have some anecdotal information about what the House bill debate considered and some of the changes that took place. Some of the concerns had to do with the deadlines and the dates, obviously, that were worked up during the emergency session, and they just were no longer germane. They had expired already. The only substantial changes that came out of the debate on the House side had to do with one of the provisions that we did not have in place for the administration of our program that was in the original bill, and we didn't know whether or not the committee preferred to have it included or not, was the requirement of a business plan. We had an application process that was fairly standardized and gave us the information that we thought we needed to make a reasonable decision on whether or not that operation should be funded and eligible for cost share. But business plan submissions were not part of our original program. They are now. The deadlines was another one, and then the cost share provision was the major one that was part of our program, and the committee on the other side agreed that was a good safeguard for the program. Other than that, this was, a voluntary and incentive-based program whereby applying businesses had to be registered with the Secretary of State. It was for meat processors that were conducting that business at the time. And the reason that came to be, Mr. Chairman, was that the timelines were so short with the original allocation of CARES Act funding that if you were not already up and running and able to put meat into the supply chain, there just wasn't any practical way that businesses that weren't already involved in meat processing could stand up a processing plant, get it all licensed, get it all reviewed, and start putting meat into the supply chain prior to the expiration of the first program. So that was the bulk of the debate on the other side and the changes that occurred with the original act that was written in the immediate response to the pandemic.
Any further questions, committee, about what asked Senator French?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, would you help me out on page 2, it mentions constructing, but page 3, line 3, understand the COVID-19 thing for with any impacts from loss of production, loss of income, loss of production, people laid off. Where it says constructing, I mean, are we talking about constructing a new facility, an additional facility? How does that, if so, how does that relate to COVID-19 when that was to address impacts to your business, your if you had to lay off employees or cut their hours, or the business lost money? It's not, I wasn't under the impression that it was to construct a new facility. Can you help walk me through that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Senator French, I think I can provide some clarity for you. The original emergency response for meat in the supply chain had more to do with addressing the COVID-19 impacts to the meat supply nationally. That was really the impetus around the program, more so than it was a direct impact to the business. The direct impact to the business could be addressed by other programs that the state of Wyoming and a lot of our counterparts from around the nation had. And if they could document losses, they were eligible for a multitude of other federal programs and some other state programs as well for direct impacts to their business. Now, they were eligible to apply for those under this program as well. But because this program was primarily designed to address the shortage of meat in the supply chain, we were looking for mechanisms, including construction and even new facilities, if they could get them done in time, in order to get meat into the retailers around the state. And so there was a lot of cold storage that we paid for, because the more ability that processing plants had to store those products and get them to stores, that was a benefit to the supply chain. There was a lot of shutdowns of the major meat packers during the pandemic outbreak. And there was a lot of time in which meat supply became limited across the country. And that's what our program was primarily designed to combat. So we did do some construction activities during that first program. And it was our understanding that with this one, that was the desire of the committee, was to continue those type of build outs for existing or new processing plants that were to come online and hopefully supply more meat into the retail side of the business.
Right, I understand that. That first started with a neighboring state to our east when many of their employees got COVID-19 and basically shut down the plant, which backed up the fat cattle going into the plant and further backed up in the feedlots. And I get that, but is that backlog still present today?
Mr. Chairman, Senator French, that's been mostly addressed. I mean, the amount of total cattle that were processed year over year, as you compare them, is fairly small. I can't remember the exact statistic, but I want to say it was 3%, within 3%.
Okay, any further questions, committee? Okay, thank you, Director. Appreciate it. We'll go to any further public comment online. If you want to raise your hand, we'll go and let you in.
Mr. Chairman, I'm bringing in Ms. Anderson.
Okay, great.
Hi, can I speak right now? I'm testifying.
Hey, Ms. Anderson, welcome to the Ag Committee.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and the committee. I just now heard about this bill, this HB 0051. I heard Mr. Miyamoto and the legislators' comments on it. And I'm just curious that, and I do agree with the legislator, Francis, that if it was backed up, excuse me for my English, I'm trying to find words, but if the processing plant was backed up because of COVID-19, then it is not right now, it's not backed up right now, then why do we have to construct new facilities? I mean, we already have the facilities which we can use. Why do we need to fund for new construction? It doesn't make any sense to me. So I don't support this bill. Please do not pass this. Thank you. And I'm a resident of Wyoming almost for a decade, and my name is Madhu Anderson. Thank you very much.
Hey, thanks for taking the time, Ms. Anderson. Any questions? Senator Bouchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a question. What's the main reason for opposing this bill?
Go ahead, Ms. Anderson.
What's the main reason for opposing this bill? Because I don't see any extra funding needed to construct new facilities when we already have the facility, and the excuse which is given to make new facilities is because of COVID-19, they lost money. But now meat is essential, as it is said, so it is already open now. Things are working. I don't understand why to construct new facilities than just taking care of what we have already. That was my reason of opposing. It's unnecessary funding for new facilities. I don't understand why.
Okay. Any further questions, committee? Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate the testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further virtual public comment?
Mr. Chairman, no one has their hand up.
Okay, very good. We'll go to in-person comment. Ms. McGagnon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim McGagnon with the Wyoming Stock Growers Association. We strongly support this bill. As Director Miyamoto pointed out, that there just wasn't time to do some of this in the time frame that the original money had to be spent by December 31st. And he has some very good applications now that can be addressed, and there may be future ones. So if money becomes available, we think this is a proactive move by the legislature to provide that access. If I might just briefly address the concern that was expressed by Senator French. I can't quote the exact language, but there was language in the Federal CARES Act that because food supply and agriculture was considered a critical industry, there was language in there that allowed funds to be used to assure, I believe the words were supply chain security going forward. So while it was addressing that immediate need, that it allowed us to address things so that if we had another pandemic or another major outbreak of COVID or that we would have a more secure food supply. And I believe that's the federal basis that allows us to move forward. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Any questions for the stock growers? All right, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Any further public comment? Okay, go ahead.
Chairman Boner and members of the committee, Scott Meyer, on behalf of the Wyoming Bankers Association, we stand in very much support of this bill and think it will do a great deal for the state of Wyoming. The only thing that I has just was thinking that maybe that there might be a small change. If I point out to you on page 2, line 11, in the definitions there of what an eligible business is, it says facility, then comma, upgrade equipment. And giving that in the page 3, they talk about expansion. My thought would be that maybe that it would read on line 11, facility, comma, expansion and or upgrade equipment. That would make sure that that's listed as under the definition of what an eligible business. That would allow these current meat processing plants that if they needed to expand their footprint a little bit to do more, that would still fall under this as what the defined eligible business is.
Okay, any
If not, then I'd stand for any further questions.
Any questions for the bankers? Senator Wasberger.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just, I know my family was looking at this issue last spring. And I'm just wondering about the total amount of funding that we have in here is essentially $1 million. It just doesn't seem like it's enough money to really get much of anything started. My question is, how much money do we need for a new business to say, do, I don't know, 100,000 head a year? I mean, that's it's just, what are your thoughts on that?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Wasberger, I will tell you that I have a tendency to agree with you that $1 million just doesn't buy what it used to. And that just sounds almost absurd, but the reality is when you're putting together one of these plants, it does take an enormous amount of capital to put the building up and then bring the equipment in. We would certainly support anything that had an increase in that, understanding that this was a topic that's been brought up and discussed with the Department of Ag and what's going on and where that $1 million came from, I don't know. But I know that I have lenders out there that are very much wanting to support any kind of an expansion on with their meat processing customers. And because of the 50% in, contribution that you have to make here, that this may be one of those cases where more may be better than less.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Mr.
it.
Chairman.
Any further public comment? Okay, oh, Amy, come on down.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Amy Hendrickson, the Wyoming Wool Growers Association, and I'm not going to add because most of what I would have said has already been said. However, I did just want to say that we do support this bill. We think that it is a good bill for Wyoming, and it's one that we think is needed to follow up on what was done last year.
Okay. Very good. Any questions for the wool growers? Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, any further public comment? You covered just about everyone. Okay, going once, going twice. Public comment is closed. Committee, what's your pleasure? Okay, moved by Senator Cost. Any discussion or amendments on the bill? Had a few suggestions there, committee. So just go through line by or page by page. How much on page 1, but page 2, any amendments? Senator Cost.
In reference to the suggestion of moving the expansion and or upgrading of equipment, I would say on page 2, line 11, after facility, we could insert expansion and or upgrading of equipment.
Okay, so after facility, comma, add expand facilities or,
And or,
well, we usually just say or, and that's
That's
fine. Yeah.
I'm okay with.
Okay. Okay, any discussion on, you got that? Yes.
Just or.
Senator Bouchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm reading that. So it says construct. Well, actually it says, has the means, knowledge and capability to plan, construct and maintain a new meat processing facility, comma, upgrade equipment within an existing meat processing facility, or has the ability to gain the means, knowledge and capability to plan, construct and maintain a new meat processing facility. So I just wonder if the comma kind of does take care of that. So that's my question.
Yeah, I think it's just kind of a, relatively superficial change. I don't think it's going to change the outcome of the bill either way. If we want to make it, the idea is make it consistent with page 3, line 3, talking about expanding. So really kind of a vote up, vote down. I guess we haven't said that in committee too much, but
I'm okay.
you're
I'm okay to withdraw.
okay. You're withdrawing that.
Sure. I don't have any.
Okay, withdraw the amendment. Okay. Moving along, page 3, any amendments? Page 4. And committee, one thing for consideration here on say page 4, line 6, and there's another reference, page 5, line 17 to CARES Act. I don't know if we would want to consider specifically calling out the American Rescue Plan. Since that's a new addition, it could get us ahead of the game for whatever special session we might have to expend those funds as soon as we get done with the CARES Act funds. Not sure if that's something if we want to consider to get ahead of the game. That's the nice thing about this bill coming to us a little bit late. We can make those adjustments now. So that's one potential amendment there. Or not.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just a little reluctant only because, we have a lot of our, and I feel the same way as constituents that we're going to see money being poured out. I certainly don't want to be ahead of it. I think we should look at that when it comes. So that's just my personal feeling.
All right. Okay, fair enough. Any further discussion on page 4? Okay, going on to page 5. Any further discussion or amendments? Page 6. Okay, any discussion all on the bill? Last chance. Okay, question on the bill. Let's go ahead and call the roll.
Senator Bouchard. Senator French,
Aye.
Senator Cost,
Aye.
Senator Wasserberger. Chairman Boner,
Aye.
5 ayes, do pass.
Okay, do we have a volunteer to take this one on the floor? Anybody? Senator Cost, okay, sounds good. Okay, next up, we have House Bill 158, Chairman Harshman, welcome to Senate Ag.
Good afternoon, Senator, Chairman, members of the committee. Thanks for hearing the bill. House Bill 158 is really just a bill or, a clarifying bill, really. It gets an opportunity. This is a budget introduction, so I'll try to keep it at 2 minutes. And really, you're, I think, all aware of the Asphalt Specialties case, Supreme Court earlier later last year. And really, this is about zoning and making it clear that zoning is the force of law. So, Mr. Chairman, on page 2, really amends 3 titles. The first is Title 9 on page 2, line 1. Title 9 is Administration of Government Statutes. We require local governments to develop land use plans. We have since, I think that was put in statute in 1975. And you can see that just amended in the existing language, the word visions, because you're starting to see some of these called vision documents, other things that, and And those are all good. We want those to happen. We require them by law. But the key is in the new paragraph E on line 16, that these local plans may guide governments in adopting zoning regulations, but they are not the duly enacted zoning regulations. That's key for it. And then Romanet 1 and 2 are part of that new paragraph E over on page 3. If there's a conflict, it's a zoning regulation. Romanet 2 on line 5, page 3. Again, says that it has to be consistent with the zoning. The zoning regulation is the control on that, makes it perfectly clear. Paragraph F talks about these vision or planning documents cannot be used to diminish private property rights, and that these zoning regulations are the ones that control. Then, Mr. Chairman, on line 17, Title 15 or cities and towns really brings this concept forward as well. And you can read it over, carries over to page 4, new language, that nothing in this article, any land use or physical development that has to be anything that is inconsistent really with zoning regulations, zoning controls. And then, Mr. Chairman, on page 4, members of the committee, Title 18 deals with our counties. And you can see the new language added on the bottom of page 4 and onto page 5. And no zoning resolution or plan shall require land use physical development otherwise allowed under the resolution plan must also be found to be consistent with the local land use plan adopted pursuant. So again, it makes it consistent that zoning is the rule of law, and plans are great, but you can't deny the use of your land because of a plan. And I think Supreme Court of Wyoming held that in October of last year, and this bill tries to make it perfectly clear. So that's it. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Stand for any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good little property rights bill. Any questions for the sponsor committee? Okay, well, thank you, sir. Don't go too far. Any public comment online?
Mr. Chairman, no one has their hand up at this point.
Okay, very good. We'll go to in-person public comment.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Bob McLaurin. I'm with the Wyoming Association of Municipalities. And in a previous life, I was a planner for the city of Laramie, and a planner for the town of Jackson, have a degree in planning from Masters in University of Wyoming many years ago. Our members stand in opposition to this bill. We don't disagree with the intent. I think it's universally recognized that a plan is a vision statement, something you aspire to, and that the regulations that regulate land development is set forth in the zoning ordinance. So we very much agree with the intent of the bill. But as Representative Harshman stated, there was a Supreme Court case that clarified this recently. There was also a case out of the 9th Judicial District in Jackson where I was a defendant for this very same issue. And the court ruled the same way that the Supreme Court did, that the plan is a vision document and the land use regulations govern. So our members don't think the bill is necessary because it is already law, it's case law, that that land use regulations must be implemented through zoning ordinances and not land use plans. If you decide to move the bill forward, we have some suggested amendments that we think cleans up the bill a little bit. And if you're interested, I can run through those. And Jeremiah Ryman was going to be here as well. And his organization is also, I believe, in opposition to this bill as well. But like I said, we agree with the intent, but we just don't think the legislation is necessary.
Any questions so far before we get to the amendments? Just a little bit more explanation. If you agree with the intent of the bill and you don't offer any technical corrections, why are you in opposition to it?
We just don't think it's necessary, but I can go through the corrections or the proposed amendments if you would like, but We just believe that it's already set forth in case law and it's not necessary, but
That's Senator Burchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be very honest. I'm very skeptical when I see opposition to bills like this, because I've seen where in my county where they have went really hard against new development using these visions and things that they came to. And a lot of that planning didn't even come from our state. It came through things that we can trace back all the way to Europe. And some of these planning, they come in and they help these counties because they don't have staffers to do, just like we don't. Next thing you know, we have all these planners coming in, helping us with this plan that came out of a European plan to make us more green or whatever the reason is. So I'm going to tell you, I'm very skeptical when I hear opposition to bills that, we start trying to protect the property rights of individuals.
I suppose there's a question there somewhere, but
Mr. Chairman.
yes.
I would submit to you that your property rights are protected by the zoning ordinance and the land use as pursuant to the decision of the Supreme Court. You cannot implement land use regulations with a land use plan or any visioning document. It takes a zoning ordinance that's gone through the procedural due process requirements and the substantive due process requirements to be formally adopted by county commission. The case in Teton County was the land use plan was a little bit different than the zoning ordinance. And the plaintiffs alleged that the town approved a hotel based on the zoning ordinance. And the plaintiffs alleged that the land use plan didn't provide for that and sued the town. The town's defense was that the zoning ordinance guides land development and the plan is a vision, and we were upheld. And it did not go to the Supreme Court, but it was a decision at the 9th Judicial District.
Any further questions before we get into maybe have some suggested amendments you mentioned?
Our suggested amendments, I'm working off the engrossed copy on page 3. We would recommend you delete lines 5 through 9. And then on page 3, line 23, beginning at no regulation, delete that through line 5 on page 4. And then on page 4, line 23, where it starts no zoning resolution, delete that through line 4 on page 5. As I read it, the essence of the bill is on page 3, lines 11 through 15. That's the crux of the bill from our perspective. And that we would leave that one in we agree with that section, sir.
Okay, any questions on the suggested amendment? Okay, well, we'll have that discussion, I'm sure, in a little bit. So
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd say I'm really happy to appear before you and not be talking about affordable housing today. So thank you very much.
every day's a new day here. So, okay, any further public comment? Mr. Ryman, welcome. They just get done next door? Okay, well, I won't go over there.
Would open though for you, Mr. Chairman, if.
No, we'll see what happens. Depends how fast you are.
Mr. Chairman, I do want to keep this brief. My members are opposed to the bill, and that's largely because, sorry, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Jeremiah Riemann. here on behalf of the County Commissioners Association. The members are opposed only because we believe that one particular provision goes outside of the bounds of the Supreme Court holding that this particular bill is intended to square up with. And that provision is found on page 3, lines 5 through 9. It also shows up 2 other times, one starting at the bottom of page 3 on line 23 and also at the bottom of page 4 on line 23. And that's relative to the provision that says no local zoning regulation. Now, if I can just back up very briefly on that, a couple of things. One, we absolutely agree with the notion that zoning is the pinnacle of land control. And so don't get me wrong, we agree on that point. Mr. Chairman, we believe, however, that this kind of strays a little bit and may actually harm a couple of counties. In the asphalt holding, the conclusion starts off with counties may only restrict a land use pursuant to zoning. Again, we agree with that, but what the holding doesn't say is that you can't, in your zoning regulation that's gone through the public process, pick pieces out of a land use plan that apply to that particular zoning issue. And that seems appropriate that a county might do that. It's not unlike what you all do occasionally with a legislative piece where you say, we refer to this particular regulation. And so we have concern when it then in this bill says no local zoning regulation and then goes on to give a particular instance of when that would negate duly enacted zoning regulation. So, Mr. Chairman, our easiest fix is to just ask you to delete that language throughout the bill. I know that may not be something you desire. And so I am working on some unless language that I can present to you shortly. As you can imagine, I'm not an attorney. This is rather legal in nature. And so I'm trying to work that very quickly and give you something proper. And so I hesitate to give it to you today, but essentially it would say, unless you have gone through the appropriate zoning process to incorporate by reference a particular section of your local land use plan, then you couldn't do this. And the rest of the language would stay as is. So, Mr. Chairman, again, I want to be short and would stand for any question.
Any questions from the county commissioners? Okay, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Any further public comment? Mr. McGagnon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're very supportive of this bill because we think it provides clarity for property owners. As previous speakers have pointed out, the Supreme Court has already ruled on this, but if I, as a property owner, want to do a development, I shouldn't have to go have an attorney research court records to find out what I'm allowed to do. I should be able to look at the zoning regulations and understand the statutes as they apply and be able to move forward with that. So for that reason, we support it. I would offer, Mr. Chairman, a brief comment on the provisions that have been questioned by a previous speaker. And I guess, just to be honest, I read that very differently. That, for example, on lines 5 through 9 on page 3, that the regulation can't require that a land use or physical development otherwise allowed under the zoning regulation must be found to be consistent with the local land use plan. So my reading of that is that it doesn't preclude a zoning regulation from referencing something in the land use plan and thereby approving it. But if its activity is allowed under the zoning regulation, then they can't preclude it because of the land use plan. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Okay, any questions for the stockbrokers?
Thank you.
Thank
Mr.
you, sir.
Chairman.
Any further public comment? Go ahead. Oh, yeah, come on up, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman, I think the public comment, I don't think the proposed amendments are necessarily death of the bill. I mean, I think there is probably a path forward to maybe make that even clearer that Mr. Reeman talked about that can maybe get you on a committee of the whole or second reading amendment. I think there is a way to probably clean that up a little more and everybody can kind of go, yeah, we just improved all this instead of folks walking away. Well, I hope we didn't do any harm. Because it is an area I think that needs cleaned up, no doubt about it. And I think, with some of this input, I think we can make it a little better. So thank you, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman.
So, Mr. Chairman, I understand if we just move this bill forward unamended, you'd be committed to working with the county commissioners to find a committee of the whole amendment then, or?
Mr. Chairman, sure, I think so. And I think, we have a good working relationship and value that and you betcha, I think we good. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any questions or just Senator Bouchard? Real quick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to ask, just looking a little further out, because I think that we have limited staff. We have a lot of problems where we can't get some of the legal questions answered in a timely manner. I don't know whether there's even a harm if we were to move this bill like it was all the way through and then come back next year. And then when we got time or more lawyers look at it around the state. So would you agree that's also a good plan too?
Mr. Chairman, wouldn't you agree?
Mr. Chairman, sure. I think it's a continual process to keep improving these things. I think the main thing I'm trying to do is that there's just no question about that zoning is the rule of law, not because that's done in public and everybody sees it. And I know planning documents have public meetings too, but I just don't think some of those things are pretty big and they're done in subcommittees sometimes, and they're done in public too. I'm not, but I just think it makes it clear for the public, what are the rules that I have to play by? And that's all I'm trying to do. And I'm not trying to do any harm and get us into more court cases down the road. So if we can find that right balance to kind of clean that up and clear it up, it'd be good. So.
Okay, any further questions, committee? All right, thank you, sir. Hey, any further public comment? Going once, going twice? Public comment is closed. Committee, what's your pleasure? Moved by Senator Bouchard, seconded by Senator Cost. Any discussion or amendments on the bill? Okay, saying none, go ahead and call the roll.
Senator Bouchard, excuse me, Senator Bouchard.
Aye.
Senator French,
Aye.
Senator Cost,
Aye.
Senator Wasserberger,
Aye.
Chairman Boner.
Aye.
5 ayes, do pass.
Hey, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And the last bill we have up is House Bill 96, Treatment of Animals, Representative Larson. You're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Mr. Chairman, if I may, just to your point on House Bill 51 on your ag stuff, as that came through you posed the question on the ARPA funds. And the two appropriations committee have a bill, it's your Senate File 118 that we're amending that will include and makes provision to adopt any of that in there. So fair question, and it's one that we've been thinking of as well. So good point. Mr. Chairman, House Bill 96 is I'm reading for you today is in response to some folks around the state who deal a lot with gathering up stray animals and taking care of them and working with animal control facilities and our laws on how those facilities can euthanize animals. And our statutes were a little bit antiquated in the process that they were allowed to use is outdated, however, may still be used in a few places around the state. I think we're getting better at that, but we will felt like it's time to update that. And as I started out with the bill in the House and presented it on the House side, fortunately, we had some of your joint ag members on that committee. And we passed the bill out, but we had to amend it to bring it back into your Senate File 26, where you readjusted all of the cruelty to animals and stuff. And so I think we've done that in the bill. And so, Mr. Chairman, if I could maybe start on the bill on page 3 for you, where we give the definition of an animal control facility, meaning a public or private facility with a primary purpose is to provide temporary care of stray, surrendered, or neglected household pets. There's a couple of really important points in here. It means a public or private with a primary purpose. So if you've got a veterinary facility that, like I have in my town, where the veterinarian takes care of some of this, but his primary business is veterinary work, this does not apply to him. Okay. This does not apply to, as I said here in front of the Ag Committee, does not apply to ranchers or to the private citizen. It really, it applies to animal control facilities, and it is dealing with surrendered or neglected household pets. And if we go back, you guys have identified previously what household pets are, and that's found on page 4 of the bill under Romanette 3, the new Romanette 3. And so it's really away from the agrarian society and dealing with these folks that are working with these pets that come in. Now, what we're trying to do here, Mr. Chairman, is adopt, according to what our veterinarians have told us, the most humane way of euthanizing, using sodium pentobarbital or a derivative. We had discussion on the House side about, is that hard to get to? Can you get it? Our good speaker, who is also a veterinarian, says for animals, it's readily accessible, and said this is the best way to do that. He says it's also not as important for the animal, but it's also important for the people who are administering and taking care of these animals, that they know that they're doing it the most humane way. Mr. Chairman, if you'll flip to the last page with me on page 5, there's a section D there that talks about an animal control facility shall not destroy an animal by the use of high altitude decompression chamber, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, or any non-anesthetic inhalant. In our existing statutes, we come to the conclusion that said a person may not. And as we discussed this on the House side, it came out that an individual, if he used one of those means, and they used an example of a household pet that was ill, and they went on the internet and looked at the most humane way to euthanize them, and they did talk about the use of carbon monoxide, and that's how they put the animal down. But according to our existing statute, that would have been inappropriate. And so we changed this to clarify that an animal control facility can't use those. The individual, it kind of goes back to farm or ranch, or a private person in their own home will take care of those actions as they deem appropriate. So, Mr. Chairman, just in closing, I think that there's 5 animal control facilities. I think I mentioned that already around the state that do that. We're just trying to bring everything up to date. On page 1 of the bill, starting on line 9, we talk about how that goes into practice and the requirements of it, and the policy behind that they would have to administer, and in the training program for those that were going to administer it. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Representative Larson? Oh, well, I'm just looking at the bill. It looks like section 1's section 6-3-1001. But then when we go to the definitions, we're trying to amend the same section. I guess I've never seen that in the bill. I'm just wondering how that would work. We're creating a new section which already exists in the in current statute. I'm just confused on that part.
Mr. Chairman, going back to the conversation when we had it on the House side, we took this back to LSO and said we need to make it now conform with the work that you'd done. And this was the amendment that they give us.
Well,
Unless I didn't understand your
so
question accurately.
I'm just right. And I'm just wondering if, we got a moving target here. Maybe there was a mistake. Page 1, line 9. So we're creating section 1001, but that already exists and I've never seen that. You'd think you'd add a new section to whatever the next available section is.
I would agree with that. Because 631, I think, Mr. Chairman, I think that's a mistake because your 63101, as you point out, is your definitions,
Right.
as you see on page 3. So, and I didn't catch, I certainly didn't catch that. So I'd like to go back and I think we could correct that, but I think that's a, what do you call it? A drafting, perhaps drafting.
Technical error or something.
Yeah.
Okay. And
because in under the old bill, the original bill, where we brought that in, we created under existing 63203, and it, which is not the and then and then it goes into the definitions. So
all right. Okay.
I'd be happy to follow up with that.
Okay. Fair enough. Senator Bouchard, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm kind of curious how many places use this thing that we're trying to go against here. And also, I'm just trying to gather this in my head because I mean, I've seen where people commit suicide and they use a garage and a car because they don't want to use any of the other things because they're afraid that it's either painful or, and then when they do it, they go to sleep and they don't wake up. So I'm just trying to figure out, I mean, I get the whole idea that what you're saying, but I'm trying to figure out why do we know that this is inhumane? If people do it in their garage because they're trying to avoid the pain, how is it different here? Are we using carbon monoxide or carbon dioxide, or what's the major component that's the problem?
Go ahead.
So, Mr. Chairman, the recommendation for using this procedure really comes back from the professionals that euthanize, and your argument, if an individual thinks that using carbon monoxide is the most appropriate way, we wouldn't. This bill doesn't go there, but within an animal control unit, you take your dog in because he's got irreparable ailment and they're going to a vet, they're going to give him a shot and put him to sleep. And we're saying in these animal control facilities, which are generally run by a municipality, that we expect them to use the same most humane practices. And that's not always, and the administration is more consistent this way than it is by shutting the garage door and doing that way.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I'm just trying to figure out here though, how do we know that? I mean, where is the problem with? I only use this scenario because we know that this happens in real life with people. And I'm trying to figure out, is it not the same with an animal? I mean, they go to sleep and it may be even less traumatic because they don't have to get poked with a needle even. I mean,
and again, Mr. Chairman and Senator Bouchard, the recommendation for this was from the professionals who, the veterinarians who who use this in their own practice and recommend this as rather in their own practice, use this rather than using carbon monoxide and have recommended this. And so just like every other, whether it be human or animal, we use those best practices as they adopt it. I can't answer how they know one is better than the other. I just am taking their word for it. I don't have this. I don't know.
Any further questions? And just as far as just the idea behind the bill, it looks like there's reference to Title 33. Is that, I'm assuming that's the licensure for veterinarians. Is that correct?
It is.
And so I guess I appreciate you want to incorporate best practices in the statutes now, but what if the best practice changes? We're gonna have to come back with another piece of legislation to.
Mr. Chairman, as we always do. I think, the same reason you just got through changing all of the animal abuse things, those definitions change. I think best practices we do. We do come back and change it as science changes and as what society approved changes. Then I think that our statutes are, as much as we would like to think they're static, they tend to change from time to time.
And so I guess another question, in these, I guess, animal control facilities that aren't doing the things the way we want them to with this bill, are there licensed veterinarians that are administering those procedures, or is it just staff at the?
Staff.
Okay. All right. Any further questions? Okay, well, thank you, Representative.
Thank you.
Okay, any public comment? Oh, I guess we'll go online first. That's our procedure. Anybody have their hand raised?
No, Mr. Chairman, no one does.
Okay, in person. There we go.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, thank you for hearing this bill at the very late hour. If it's okay, I'd just like to answer a couple of Senator Bouchard's questions and concerns, and maybe for the rest of the committee members. My name is Janet Marshner. I live here in Cheyenne, and I did serve, I think, about 25 years on the local animal shelter board. And I did start my own rescue. It's called Yola's Pet Rescue, and I rescue puppies off of the Wind River Indian Reservation. So I've spent a few years just dealing with issues like this. The animal shelter here has never used a gas chamber that I know of to euthanize animals. And there are a couple of facilities in the state that still use the gas chambers. And that is really what we are trying to get that language. I believe Wyoming is probably one of only 3 states that still has active gas chambers. So as Representative Larson did mention, it is an antiquated use or way of euthanizing animals. So I think Wyoming, we want to be seen as following best practices. And unfortunately, there are animals that have to be euthanized. There are not homes for all of them. They come in as injured, sick, old, whatever. It's a sad thing for the staff. And as far as using carbon monoxide, I do not think I would want shelter staff euthanizing animals with carbon monoxide. I think that would be dangerous for the staff. I do agree with you on your point, but I don't think that would be best practice in an animal shelter setting. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, Senator Bouchard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Aren't these chambers, though, designed for this purpose? I mean, so I mean, kind of like you could put any gas in there and it's going out venting somewhere else outside of close the door. I mean, so I'm just trying to figure out, I haven't heard any complaints, so I'm trying to figure out what's going on here. And so that's one. I mean, is this equipment designed for the purpose? So I don't think it's putting people at risk, unless you're going to tell me it does. But the other question would be, isn't this a local control issue? I mean, wouldn't it be better to go to those places instead of, I just don't see a place to have a state preemption where we're telling locals what to do. And can you tell me which places do this? And is there a reason they're objecting to the change?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Bouchard, to my knowledge, I know for sure that the sheriff's department in Evanston still uses a gas chamber. I do believe that some of these units are probably not serviced anymore. So I think that there could be equipment failure. I mean, it's just not a common practice. I have not been to Evanston to look at their gas chamber, but I do believe that there are some concerns, even with staff. If you can imagine what the staff taking an animal and putting them into a chamber, and you're enclosing them in this dark space, when it's actually safer and more cost effective to give them a shot and let them, just like when you've taken your household pet to the vet to be euthanized. That is such a humane way for an animal to die versus putting them into a gas chamber. I can't even imagine euthanizing an animal in that way. And it is an antiquated technology. That is a fact.
And just to follow up, so if you discuss this with any of the local municipality and just a little bit more information, since they're not here, how that conversation went. I mean, we're kind of, it seems like we're kind of in a void here, and we have, if, we're talking about Evanston, nobody here from Evanston, and, we have just a little bit more discussion as to the efforts so far to, do this at the local level before we start talking about state law.
Sure, Chairman Bonner. We did, I know that the Humane Society has approached all of the communities with gas chambers and has offered a $3,000 grant to help them transition to the injection for euthanizing animals. And I think that the money could be used for education and helping the staff to make that change. It's very traumatic for shelter staff. Even if they do it every day, it's still very hard to euthanize animals. That is a very difficult job. And we just, and I'm not affiliated with the Humane Society. I'm just here as an individual, but I do believe that Wyoming, I would like to see our statutes updated so that we don't have this antiquated method of euthanizing animals still in the state.
And so so they're offered $3,000 and they still don't do it. I'm wondering what the reason is. There has to be a reason that these, and it's hard because there's nobody else in the room to hear the other side here. And so just if you don't want to do it, that's understandable, but it will be helpful to understand why they're focused on keeping this procedure.
Mr. Chairman, I do believe that they think that it's easier to put them in a gas chamber because they don't have to handle them as much as if they gave them a shot, which is actually the opposite of with education, they would see that it is easier and more humane to give them the animal an injection.
Okay.
I think it's just old school thinking, honestly.
Okay.
Thank
Any
you.
further questions? Okay, thank you for your testimony. Okay, well, looks like there's no more public comment. Representative Larson, you want anything else, or?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I think just one thought on the local control. I agree that there's local control, but we also have in statutes. That's why you guys went back and changed the statutes and addressed cruelty to animals, and you do it for a variety of reasons. Is there's local control, but we do draft laws that say what is appropriate use of an animal, whether it be caught fighting, dog fighting, or how we handle animals. And so I certainly support local control, but I also know that we have in statutes on how we treat animals. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd be happy to answer any other questions you might. Oh, and Mr. Chairman, this bill's been out there for a while. It's been over the Senate for a while. I have not received any comments from any of the municipalities or any of the animal control shelters in a negative way saying, why are you doing this to us? We haven't had any comment from any of the facilities or the municipalities that do that say that it's going to be an imposition for them. Why they're not here, they've certainly had opportunity, certainly been invited, and it's certainly been noticed, but and I guess to me, I would interpret that to validate a little bit of the antiquity associated with the methods used. Thank you.
Okay, any questions? Hey, thank you, sir. Okay, last chance for public comment. Public comment is closed. Committee, what's your pleasure? It's usually respectful just to move the bill. Okay. Any motion on the bill? Okay, well. Okay, and yeah, Representative Larson, I mean, yeah, I think, yeah, we'll continue to engage with those local communities, and I mean, I was interested in learning more, but yeah, that's. Okay, okay. Oh, sure.
Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman. So, Representative?
No, we're done.
I want to just chime in real quick.
I'm sure you did.
Okay, so looks like we're adjourned. Committee. We have a we're gonna have a joint committee meeting upon adjournment on Thursday to talk about interim topics, and yeah, that'll be our last ag committee meeting for the Senate here.